She stood in her own driveway, in front of her own car, accused of stealing what she'd earned. They called the police. They demanded her arrest. But what they didn't know was that the quiet woman they humiliated held more power than all of them combined. This is the story of how one terrible mistake revealed the ugly truth about who we really are. Before we dive into this incredible true story, hit that subscribe button right now and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. You know, there are moments in life when everything you've worked for, everything you've built, everything you've sacrificed, can be questioned in an instant. Not because of what you've done, but because of how you look. This is a story about one of those moments. Her name was Veronica Ashford, 42 years old, tall, graceful, with deep brown skin that glowed in the afternoon sun. She wore simple denim shorts and a crisp white fitted shirt. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed for attention. That wasn't her style. Veronica lived quietly. She moved through life like a whisper, present, powerful, but never loud. Her neighbors in the Riverside Estates, one of the most exclusive gated communities in the state, barely knew her name. They never saw her at the neighborhood barbecues, never heard her gossip at the mailbox, never watched her show off. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly imagine, was that Veronica Ashford was one of the most powerful legal minds in America. A federal judge. Not just any judge, but one who had shaped laws, protected rights, and brought justice to people who thought justice had forgotten them. Before the bench, she was an undefeated civil rights attorney. Before that, a decorated legal officer in the Air Force. And before all of that, she was just a girl from a small town in Alabama who watched her mother lose job after job because some people couldn't see past the color of her skin. Veronica's calm wasn't weakness. Her silence wasn't fear. It was patience. The kind of patience that comes from fighting battles most people never have to face. On this particular Tuesday afternoon, she stood in her driveway, in front of her white towering mansion, the one she'd bought with years of hard work and sacrifice. Beside her sat her yellow Lamborghini, bright, beautiful, and completely hers. But to some people, it was impossible. "Get off my car." The voice cut through the quiet neighborhood like a knife. Veronica turned slowly. There, sitting right on the hood of her Lamborghini, was a young man. 24 years old, wearing an expensive tracksuit and designer sneakers. His name was Tyler Carmichael, and he sat on that car like it was his personal throne. His shoes pressed into the paint. He didn't care. Beside him stood his mother, Brenda Carmichael. Mid-50s, blonde hair pulled tight, wearing silk pajamas at 3 in the afternoon. She was known across Riverside Estates for two things: her loud voice and her louder opinions. Brenda's eyes narrowed as she looked at Veronica. "Excuse me?" Brenda snapped. "Who do you think you're talking to?" Veronica took a slow breath. "I'm asking your son to get off my car." Tyler laughed. Actually laughed. "Your car? Lady, this is a Lamborghini. You expect us to believe you own this?" Veronica didn't flinch. She simply stood there, her face calm, her eyes steady. "Yes," she said quietly. "Because I do." Brenda stepped closer, her face twisted in disbelief. "I know everyone in this neighborhood. Everyone. And I have never seen you before." "That's because you never looked," Veronica replied softly. Tyler hopped off the hood, finally, but only to walk around the car like he owned it. He peered through the windows, touched the side mirror, smirked. "People like you don't drive cars like this," he said, his voice dripping with arrogance. There it was. That phrase. People like you. Veronica had heard it 1,000 times in 1,000 different ways. In courtrooms, in stores, in restaurants, in her own neighborhood. People like you don't belong here. People like you can't afford this. People like you should know your place. But she didn't respond. Not yet. Brenda pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the police." "For what?" Veronica asked calmly. "For you," Brenda hissed. You're trespassing. You're clearly snooping around. And when my son tried to stop you, you threatened him. Veronica's eyebrows lifted slightly. I did no such thing. She did. Tyler jumped in. She came at me like she was going to attack me. I had to defend myself. It was a lie. A complete, shameless lie. But Brenda nodded like it was gospel truth. You people steal cars like this all the time, Brenda said, venom in her voice. You think we don't know? You think we're stupid? Veronica's jaw tightened. Just barely. But she didn't move. Didn't shout. Didn't give them the reaction they wanted. Instead, she simply said, This is my home. This is my car. And you need to leave my property. Your property? Tyler laughed again, louder this time. Lady, you don't own anything here. You probably clean one of these houses, don't you? Brenda smirked. Or maybe you're a nanny. That would make sense. Veronica's hands curled into fists at her sides. Not from anger. From control. From years of holding herself together when the world tried to tear her apart. She thought about her mother in that moment. How many times had her mother been spoken to like this? How many times had she swallowed her pride just to keep a roof over their heads? But Veronica wasn't her mother. She had power now. She had a voice. She had rights. And she wasn't going anywhere. The sirens came fast. 2 police cars pulled up to the driveway, lights flashing. 4 officers stepped out, hands near their belts, eyes scanning the scene. Brenda rushed toward them immediately, her voice shrill and panicked. Officers! Thank God you're here. This woman, she attacked my son. She threatened us. She doesn't belong here. Tyler nodded eagerly. She was snooping around the car. When I confronted her, she went crazy. The officers looked at Veronica. She stood there calm, quiet, hands at her sides. One of the officers, a stocky man with a hard face, stepped forward. Ma'am, he said, his voice sharp. We're going to need you to put your hands behind your back. Veronica didn't move. On what grounds? Trespassing. Possible theft. Threatening behavior. I live here, Veronica said evenly. This is my home. That is my car. Brenda scoffed loudly. She's lying. She doesn't live here. Look at her. The second officer, younger, taller, moved in closer. Ma'am, don't make this difficult. Just comply. Neighbors had started to gather now. Some stood on their porches. Others peered through windows. A few pulled out their phones, recording. But no one stepped forward. No one said a word. Tyler leaned against the Lamborghini again, arms crossed, grinning like he'd won. You're lucky we even called the cops, he said, his voice dripping with cruelty. If this was my grandfather's day, you'd be. He stopped mid-sentence. Because in that moment, Veronica lifted her chin slightly. The afternoon sun caught something around her neck. A small gold emblem, hanging on a delicate chain. One of the officers froze. His eyes locked onto it. His face went pale. Wait, he whispered. But Tyler didn't notice. Brenda didn't notice. They kept talking, kept laughing, kept piling on their lies. The officer stepped closer, squinting at the emblem. His hand started to shake. Oh my God, he breathed. Veronica looked at him. Just looked. Calm. Patient. Waiting. And in that moment, everything was about to change. That emblem would change everything. What happens when the truth finally comes to light? Stay with us for Chapter 2, where everything Brenda and Tyler thought they knew gets turned completely upside down. You know what's interesting about power? Real power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. It just exists. Quiet. Still. Waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. And for Veronica Ashford, that moment had finally arrived. The officer's face had gone completely white. His partner noticed immediately. Harris, what's wrong? The younger officer asked. Officer Harris, the stocky one who'd been so confident just seconds ago, couldn't speak. He just stared at the gold emblem hanging from Veronica's neck. His hands trembled. His breathing quickened. The emblem was small, elegant, but unmistakable to anyone who knew what it meant. It bore the seal of the United States District Court. Not just any court employee. Not a lawyer. Not a clerk. A federal judge. "Ma'am," Officer Harris finally whispered, his voice cracking. "That emblem, are you?" Veronica tilted her head slightly, letting the sun catch the gold once more. Her voice was soft, but it cut through the chaos like a blade. "Officers," she said calmly, "you may want to verify the vehicle registration before you continue." The younger officer, Bennett, looked confused. "Ma'am, we're just responding to a call." "That emblem," Harris interrupted, his voice barely audible. That's federal." Bennett's eyes widened. He took a step back, suddenly uncertain. Brenda sensed the shift immediately. Her confident smirk faltered. What are you talking about?" she demanded. "Why are you listening to her? She's lying. She probably stole that necklace too." Tyler nodded eagerly. "Yeah, she's playing you guys. People like her, they—" "Shut up." Officer Harris barked suddenly, whirling on Tyler with a look that could melt steel. Tyler's mouth snapped shut. Brenda gasped. "What did you just say to my son?" Brenda shrieked. "You can't talk to him like that. You're supposed to be arresting her." But Harris wasn't listening anymore. He turned back to Veronica, his face pale, his hands still shaking. "Judge Ashford," he whispered. The name hung in the air like thunder. Veronica didn't smile, didn't gloat. She simply nodded once. "Yes," she said quietly. The world seemed to stop. Bennett stumbled backward, his hand going to his radio instinctively, then dropping. He looked like he'd just swallowed glass. "Oh God," he breathed. "Oh God, oh God." "Judge," Brenda repeated, her voice rising in pitch. "She's no judge. She's lying. Look at her. She doesn't look like—" She stopped herself, but everyone heard what she didn't say. Veronica's eyes never left Brenda's face. Cold. Steady. Unflinching. "I don't look like what, Brenda?" Veronica asked softly. Brenda's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Tyler, still oblivious, scoffed. "Come on, this is ridiculous. She's probably just some—" "Sir," Officer Bennett interrupted, his voice tight and professional now. "Step away from the vehicle." "Now." Tyler blinked. "What? Why?" "She's the criminal." "No," Bennett said firmly, his face pale but resolute. "She is the owner of this vehicle, this property, and this home. And you, sir, are trespassing." Brenda's face went from red to white in seconds. That's impossible. I've lived here for 12 years. I know everyone in this neighborhood." "You don't know her," Veronica said quietly, her voice like silk over steel. "You never tried." The neighbors who had been watching from their windows and porches suddenly started moving closer. Whispers rippled through the crowd like electricity. "Wait, that's her house? Oh my God, she's the judge who handled the Richardson case. I've seen her on the news. She's the one who—" "They called the cops on a federal judge?" The realization spread like wildfire. Faces changed. Eyes widened. Phones lifted higher, recording everything. One woman, standing near her mailbox, covered her mouth in shock. "I've walked past her 100 times and never even said hello." Officer Harris pulled out his radio with shaking hands. "Dispatch, this is Unit 47. We need to verify a registration. Yellow Lamborghini license plate." He looked at Veronica. She recited the number calmly from memory. There was a pause. Then the dispatcher's voice crackled back. "Registration confirmed. Vehicle belongs to Veronica L. Ashford. Address matches current location. Owner is, The dispatcher's voice changed, became cautious. "Owner is listed as a federal employee with the district court." Harris closed his eyes. "Copy that." He turned to Veronica, his face gray. "Judge Ashford, we didn't know." "Yes," Veronica said, her voice quiet but heavy with meaning. "That's the problem. The silence that followed was deafening. Brenda stood frozen, her brain clearly struggling to process what was happening. Tyler looked from the officers to his mother to Veronica, his arrogance finally cracking. This doesn't make sense, Brenda stammered. How could she? I mean, she can't possibly. I can't possibly what? Veronica asked, taking a single step forward. Be successful? Own a nice car? Live in this neighborhood? Be a federal judge? Brenda's mouth worked, but no sound came out. Veronica's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath it now. I grew up in Alabama. My mother worked 2 jobs her entire life. She cleaned houses. She cooked in restaurants. She did everything right, and still, people like you looked at her and saw nothing. She paused, letting the words sink in. I joined the Air Force, became a legal officer, served my country. Then I went to law school, graduated top of my class, became a civil rights attorney and never lost a case. Not one. Tyler's face was pale now. The grin was gone. I fought for people who couldn't fight for themselves, Veronica continued. I stood in courtrooms where people doubted me every single day, where they questioned my credentials, my intelligence, my right to even be there. And I won. Every single time. Brenda started to back away slowly. 3 years ago, Veronica said, her voice steady, I was appointed to the federal bench. I've presided over corruption cases, civil rights violations, police misconduct. Officer Harris visibly flinched at that last one. I bought this house with money I earned, Veronica said. I bought that car with money I earned. I earned every single thing I have. And yet here I am, in my own driveway, being accused of theft by strangers who know nothing about me except what they assumed based on how I look. The weight of her words settled over the crowd like snow. Officer Bennett stepped forward, his voice shaky. Judge Ashford, we need to place these 2 under arrest. What? Brenda exploded. For what? We're the victims here. Ma'am, Bennett said, his voice now cold and official, you're being charged with filing a false police report, trespassing on private property, and... He looked at the scratches on the Lamborghini's hood where Tyler had been sitting. Vandalism of private property. Tyler's eyes went wide. Vandalism? I didn't. You sat on her car, sir, Harris said flatly. You damaged the paint. There are witnesses. And cameras. Tyler looked around wildly. Sure enough, small security cameras were mounted discreetly around Veronica's property. He hadn't noticed them before. Turn around, Bennett ordered. Both of you. Hands behind your backs. This is insane. Brenda screamed. This is racism. You're arresting us because we're white. Veronica's expression didn't change. She just watched. Waited. Ma'am, Harris said tiredly, you accused a federal judge of stealing her own car and threatened to have her arrested based on nothing but your assumptions. That's not racism against you. That's consequences. Tyler tried to run. Actually tried to run. He made it about 5 steps before Bennett's voice stopped him cold. Sir, there are 12 cameras on this property alone. Run if you want. We'll just add evading arrest to your charges. Tyler froze. His shoulders slumped. Defeated. The handcuffs clicked into place. First on Brenda. Then on Tyler. The exact same handcuffs they'd wanted to put on Veronica just minutes ago. The irony was almost poetic. Brenda started crying. Not quiet tears. Loud, ugly sobs. This isn't fair. We didn't know. How were we supposed to know? Veronica stepped closer, her voice soft but clear. You weren't supposed to know who I was, Brenda. You were supposed to treat me with basic human respect regardless. Brenda's sobs got louder. Tyler hung his head, finally silent, finally understanding that his privilege couldn't save him this time. The officers led them toward the patrol cars. The entire neighborhood watched. Every single person. Some looked ashamed. Others looked stunned. A few nodded quietly, as if they'd been waiting for this moment for years. As Brenda and Tyler were placed in the back of the squad car, their faces pressed against the window, their perfect world crumbling around them, Veronica stood tall and unmoved. Officer Harris approached her one last time, his hat in his hands. "Judge Ashford," he said quietly, "I want to apologize. Not just for today, but for what could have happened if you hadn't had that emblem." Veronica looked at him for a long moment. She saw the fear in his eyes, the realization, the shame. "How many times?" she whispered. "How many times must a black person prove they belong in a space they've already paid for?" Harris had no answer, because there was no good answer. Veronica took a slow breath, then spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "Do better," she said. "All of you." Justice had been served. But Veronica's story wasn't over yet. In Chapter 3, we'll discover what happens when an entire community is forced to look in the mirror and confront the truth they've been avoiding. You know what's harder than fighting for justice? Living with it afterward. Because justice doesn't erase the past. It doesn't heal the wounds. It just forces everyone to face the truth they've been avoiding. And sometimes that truth is the hardest thing of all. The street was still buzzing with tension. The police cars sat in Veronica's driveway, lights still flashing, casting red and blue shadows across the pristine white houses. Brenda and Tyler sat in the back seat, handcuffed, their faces pressed against the window like animals in a zoo. But the show wasn't over yet. "Judge Ashford. Judge Ashford, please wait." The voice came from behind her, desperate and breathless. Veronica paused at her front steps, her hand on the doorknob. She turned slowly. A man was jogging toward her, his expensive loafers clicking on the stone driveway. Silver hair, tailored suit despite the heat, hands shaking. His name was Gerald Patterson, and he was the president of the Riverside Estates Homeowners Association. The man who had approved every rule, every regulation, every standard in this neighborhood. "Judge Ashford," he panted, stopping a respectful distance away. "Please. Just one moment." Veronica said nothing. She simply waited, her face unreadable, giving him space to speak. The silence made him more nervous. His hands fidgeted. His eyes darted around at the watching neighbors. "I want to apologize," Gerald finally said, his voice cracking. "I didn't know. I didn't know who you were. I didn't know you lived here. If I had known..." Veronica lifted one hand gently. Just a small gesture. "Stop," she said softly. Gerald stopped mid-sentence, his mouth hanging open. Veronica took a single step closer, her voice quiet but cutting. "You would have treated me better if you had known my title," she said. "But not because I'm human. Not because I deserve basic respect like everyone else. Because I have power." Gerald's face flushed red. "Caught. Exposed. That," Veronica continued, "is the real problem." He lowered his head like a child being scolded by a parent. "You're right," he whispered. "You're absolutely right." As Gerald stood there, ashamed and speechless, Veronica felt something stir inside her. Old memories. Old wounds. She saw her mother again, coming home exhausted after working 2 jobs, crying quietly in the bathroom because she'd been passed over for a promotion again. "They said I wasn't a good fit for the company culture," her mother had whispered. "What does that even mean, Ronnie?" Veronica had known exactly what it meant. Even at 12 years old, she'd known. She remembered being followed in stores. Every single time. Security guards hovering near her like vultures, watching her hands, watching her bag, watching her skin. She remembered her first day as a lawyer. Walking into the courtroom in her best suit, her briefcase polished, her confidence high. And the opposing counsel had looked at her and asked, "Where's your attorney?" "I am the attorney," she'd said. He'd laughed. Actually laughed. She'd destroyed him in court that day. Utterly destroyed him. But the memory still stung. And now this. Her own home. Her own driveway. Her own car. And still, Someone had looked at her and seen only a criminal. How many times? How many times did she have to prove herself? How many times did she have to show her credentials, her badge, her worth, just to be treated like a human being? The answer, she knew, was too many. Far too many. Officer Harris approached her now, slowly, carefully. He'd removed his hat out of respect. His face was gray, his eyes heavy with something that looked like grief. "Judge Ashford," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "Internal Affairs will need a full statement from you. But before that happens, I need to say something." Veronica nodded. Waiting. Harris took a deep breath, like a man about to confess a sin. "I've been on the force 19 years, he said quietly. "I've seen good officers. I've seen bad ones. I've made mistakes. God knows I've made mistakes." He paused, struggling with his words. "But today I realized something that's been sitting in my gut like poison." The crowd leaned in, listening. "If you hadn't had that emblem," Harris whispered, his voice breaking, "we might have taken you to the ground. We might have. God, we might have hurt you. And that terrifies me." The street went completely silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. Veronica looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the truth in his face. The fear, the regret, the horrible, dawning realization of what could have happened. What had happened to so many others who didn't have an emblem to protect them. "Then change," Veronica said softly. "Change how you see people. Change how you approach people. Change the assumptions you make before you even knock on a door." Harris nodded, tears forming in the corners of his eyes. "Yes, ma'am." Officer Bennett stepped forward next, younger, less experienced, but clearly shaken. "Judge Ashford," he said, his voice tight. "I want to learn. I need to learn. Because today I almost made the worst mistake of my career." "Then learn," Veronica said simply. "That's all anyone can ask." A woman stepped out from the crowd of neighbors. Her name was Claire Donovan, and she lived 4 houses down. She clutched her phone in both hands, trembling. "I recorded everything," Claire said, her voice shaking. "From the moment they started yelling at you. I didn't help. I just stood here and recorded, and I'm so sorry. I should have said something. I should have done something. Why didn't you?" Veronica asked gently, not accusing, just asking. Claire's eyes filled with tears. "I was scared." "Scared of what?" "Scared of saying the wrong thing. Scared of the people yelling. Scared of the police. Scared of being wrong." Her voice cracked. "And I hate myself for it." Veronica stepped closer, placing a gentle hand over Claire's trembling fingers. "Fear," Veronica said softly, "is how injustice survives. Fear protects the wrong side too often." Claire nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Do you want me to delete the video?" Claire asked. Veronica looked at her phone, then back at Claire's face. "No," she said. "Keep it. Share it if you believe it will help someone understand. Truth isn't dangerous, Claire. Silence is." Claire nodded, holding her phone close to her chest like a sacred object. In the distance, through the window of the police car, Brenda continued to sob. Her mascara ran down her cheeks in black rivers. Tyler sat beside her, his head down, refusing to look at anyone. The people who had once feared them, who had once avoided confrontation with them, now stared openly. The mask had been ripped away. The truth revealed. Gerald cleared his throat nervously. "Judge Ashford, if there's anything at all, that the neighborhood can do to make this right." Veronica turned to face the entire crowd. Every neighbor, every witness, every person who had stood by and watched. "Yes," she said. Everyone leaned in, waiting. "Learn," Veronica said, her voice carrying across the street. "Grow. Stop letting fear make you cruel. Stop letting assumptions make you unjust. Stop judging people by what you think you see and start seeing them as human beings first." Her words weren't angry. They weren't sharp. They were tired. Human. Real. The kind of voice that makes people actually listen. Veronica finally turned back toward her mansion. She walked slowly, each step deliberate, her head held high. Behind her, the yellow Lamborghini gleamed in the afternoon sun. The same car Tyler had stomped his shoes on. The same car Brenda had insisted she must have stolen. But now it symbolized something else entirely. Not wealth. Not status. Not pride. Truth. The truth that the world still judged people by skin color before humanity. The truth that even a federal judge, one of the most powerful people in the legal system, could almost become another statistic. Another name. Another tragedy. As Veronica reached the steps of her home, Officer Harris spoke one last time. Judge Ashford. She turned. He swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. You didn't have to stay calm. You didn't owe us that. Veronica looked at him for a long moment. Then she followed his gaze to the windows of the surrounding houses. Small faces pressed against the glass. Children. Watching. Learning. I didn't stay calm for you, Veronica said softly, pointing to the children. I stayed calm for them. Harris followed her gesture. His eyes softened. Understanding bloomed across his face. Those children were watching. Learning what strength looked like. Learning what dignity looked like. Learning that you could face injustice and still hold your head high. Veronica nodded once, then turned back to her door. Before she stepped inside, she spoke one final time, loud enough for the entire street to hear. Respect should never depend on a title. The words hung in the air like smoke. Sharp. True. Unforgettable. The neighborhood froze. Some people nodded slowly. Others looked at the ground, ashamed. A few wiped tears from their eyes. Veronica stepped inside her home. The heavy door closed behind her with a soft, final thud. Inside, finally alone, she allowed herself to breathe. Really breathe. She was safe. She was vindicated. She had won. But the victory felt hollow. Because she knew this story wasn't just hers. It was everyone's. Every black person who had been followed in a store. Every brown person who had been questioned about where they really came from. Every person of color who had been told, in 1,000 different ways, that they didn't belong. Veronica walked to her window and looked out at the neighborhood. At the police cars. At Brenda and Tyler being driven away. At the neighbors slowly dispersing, their faces heavy with thought. This moment would change them. Maybe not all of them, but some. And maybe that was enough. 3 hours later, Gerald Patterson sent an email to every resident of Riverside Estates. The subject line read, "We need to do better." In it, he outlined new community initiatives, diversity training, community forums, open dialogues about bias and assumption. Some people ignored it. Some deleted it immediately. But some read it. And some started talking. Claire Donovan posted the video online with a simple caption. This is what fear and assumption look like. We all need to do better. It went viral within hours. Millions of views. Thousands of comments. Some supportive. Some hateful. But the conversation had started. Officer Harris requested a meeting with his captain. He wanted better training. Better protocols. Better ways to approach situations without assuming the worst. The captain agreed. Brenda and Tyler were formally charged. Brenda with filing a false police report, trespassing, and vandalism. Tyler with the same, plus attempted assault for his threats. They both faced fines, community service, and permanent records. Their perfect world had shattered. And they had no one to blame but themselves. 6 months later, Veronica still lived in her mansion. Still drove her yellow Lamborghini. Still moved through the world with quiet grace. But the neighborhood had changed. People waved now. Said hello. Asked how she was doing. Some even apologized. Not everyone. But enough. And Veronica? She accepted their apologies with the same grace she'd shown that terrible afternoon. because she understood something they were just beginning to learn. Change doesn't happen overnight. It happens in small moments, small conversations, small acts of courage. Legacy isn't what people say about you. Legacy is the truth you leave behind. And Veronica Ashford's truth was simple. Dignity cannot be taken, only given away. And she would never, ever give hers away again. If you found this story powerful, make sure you hit that subscribe button and tell us in the comments. What would you have done if you were in Veronica's shoes? How do we create a world where respect doesn't depend on titles, but on our shared humanity? Thank you for watching. And remember, treat people with respect, not because of who they are, but because of who you are. See you in the next story.